I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Picture this. You're on the deck of an aircraft carrier in the middle of the South Atlantic. It's 1982.
Okay.
The wind is just screaming, it is freezing cold, and you can smell the aviation fuel everywhere. You're 22 years old.
Young.
Very young. And you're not just any pilot. You are, by all accounts, the Queen's favorite son. You're second in line to the throne. And you are about to voluntarily climb into a helicopter to fly a mission where your job, your specific job, is to be a target.
To be the bait.
You are the bait.
It's an incredible image, isn't it? It's cinematic. That's the kind of bravery that, it should buy you a lifetime of goodwill from the public.
A lifetime, exactly. So you come home a hero. There are roses on the deck of the ship. The crowds are roaring your name. You've got the title, the uniforms, the public adoration. You are the golden boy.
The absolute peak.
Now, let's fast forward 44 years. The uniforms are gone. The titles have been stripped away. You aren't even legally called a prince anymore.
Which is just staggering to think about.
You've been served an eviction notice from your home. Your security detail's been cut. And you're facing all these legal battles, not as a royal, but as a private citizen. A guy named Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor.
That trajectory, it's almost Shakespearean. I mean, it's a tragedy in the classic sense. Although I would argue it kind of lacks the tragic hero's redemption arc at the end. It's a fall from the absolute zenith of British society to a place of isolation, of ignominy that really few of us can even comprehend.
And that is who we're talking about today, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. For decades, of course, the world knew him as Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. But the man we're looking at now is someone very different.
Completely different.
And I want to be really clear from the start. This is not just going to be a rehash of the headlines you all saw in 2019 or 2022. We're not just talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
Right, because that's the thing. If you only focus on the end, you completely miss the why. You can't possibly understand the final downfall in 2025 and 2026 without understanding the entitlement of the 1980s or the financial murkiness of his years as a trade envoy in the 2000s.
You have to connect the dots.
You have to connect the dots between the war hero we just described and the man who was just recently deemed a national security risk by UK intelligence.
For this deep dive, we have a massive stack of sources. I mean, we're talking detailed biographical records, military service logs from the Falklands, which are fascinating in their own right.
They really are.
We've got government reports on his trade activities, court filings from both the U.S. and the U.K., and, of course, the very recent and, frankly, shocking palace announcements from late 2025 about his titles and his residences.
And what we're going to see when we lay it all out is that this wasn't a sudden drop off a cliff. Not at all. It was a slow, systematic dismantling. It's a story of, well, privilege, a stunning lack of judgment, and the gradual erosion of what we can probably call the royal shield.
So let's unpack this. And to do that, we have to start at the beginning. We have to understand the height from which he fell. He was born in 1960.
And that date is really significant. You have to look at the family tree for a second. Queen Elizabeth II had Charles and Anne, and then there was this gap.
A big gap.
A 10-year gap. So Andrew was the first child born to a reigning monarch in over a century. I think it was since Queen Victoria's daughter Beatrice back in 1857.
So that sets him apart immediately. He's the baby of the family, but in a very public way.
He wasn't just another royal baby. He was kind of a statement. He was the restart of the family unit after a long pause. And by all accounts, the parenting style had softened by then.
Charles had a much more disciplined, maybe even distant upbringing.
Very much so. Andrew was, he was indulged. He was the spare, sure, but he was the charismatic one, the boisterous one.
And he goes to Gordonston, same school as his father and his brother. Charles famously hated it. He called it colditz and kilts. But Andrew, from what we can tell,
He thrived on the physicality of it. He was a natural athlete. But this is where we see the first little cracks in the personality profile start to emerge. He got a nickname from his schoolmates there that I think is incredibly telling.
What was it?
The Sniggerer.
The Sniggerer. That does not sound like a compliment.
It wasn't. His peers gave him that label because of his penchant for off-color jokes. He would apparently laugh way too hard at things that others found inappropriate or cruel or just plain awkward.
So it points to a certain tone deafness, maybe?
Yeah.
A lack of ability to read the room?
Or maybe just an arrogance, like, I'm the prince, so if I find it funny, it is funny.
That's probably closer to it.
Precisely. And that trait, that inability to understand how he's being perceived by other people, that's the thread that you can pull all the way through his life, right up to that Newsnight interview 40 years later.
But in his 20s, the media loved him. Before he even joined the military, he was Randy Andy, the professional playboy.
Oh, he fit the archetype perfectly. He was good-looking, he was charming, he was dating actresses like Stark, he was the action man prince. And the public, they love a rogue royal, as long as they stay within certain boundaries.
And then comes 1982, the Falklands War. This is the moment that just cemented his status. And honestly, looking back at the logs, I was surprised. Yeah. This was not a PR stunt.
Not at all. And this is where you have to give credit where credit is due. When the war broke out, the British government they were absolutely terrified about Andrew's involvement.
Of course.
You have the second in line to the throne serving on an active aircraft carrier, the HMS Invincible. The cabinet, the actual government, wanted to move him to a desk job in Whitehall for his own safety.
Because if he gets captured...
or, God forbid, killed... it's a national catastrophe. It's huge leverage for the Argentine junta. I mean, the risk was just astronomical.
But his mother, the Queen, she stepped in.
The Queen was adamant. She insisted that if he was a serving officer, then he had to serve. She wouldn't allow him to be wrapped in cotton wool just because of who he was. So he stayed, and he flew Sea King helicopters.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds on this decoy mission you mentioned earlier. Because decoy sounds like a polite word for suicide mission. Mm-hmm. What exactly was he doing up there?
It's incredibly dangerous work. So the Argentines were using these French-made Exocet missiles.
I've heard of those. Terrifying.
They're terrifying weapons. They're sea-skimming, radar-guided missiles that lock onto the biggest target they can find. And the Invincible, the aircraft carrier, is a massive metal target.
Right.
So the strategy was to fly the helicopters behind and slightly above the ship.
To make the helicopter look like the bigger target to the missile's radar.
Exactly. The helicopter creates a large radar cross-section. You are actively trying to seduce the missile away from the carrier, which has, 1,000 people on it, and towards your helicopter.
And if it locks on.
If the missile locks onto you, you have seconds to pull up, change your profile, and pray the missile just flies underneath you and crashes into the sea.
That takes a special kind of nerve.
It does. I mean, he witnessed the attack on the SS Atlantic conveyor, which was hit by an Exocet and sunk. He was flying casualty evacuation missions, literally pulling survivors out of the freezing South Atlantic waters. This was real, visceral, traumatic stuff.
And on top of all that, there was a specific threat against him personally, wasn't there?
Yes, the historian Andrew Lowney uncovered this. The Argentine military government had actually planned an assassination attempt against him while he was on leave in Mustique in July of '82.
An assassination attempt.
It didn't happen, obviously, but the intelligence services took it very, very seriously. He was a primary target for them.
So he comes back, a legitimate hero. His commanding officer, Nigel Ward, described him as an excellent pilot and a very promising officer.
And that hero halo is just crucial to the whole story. For the British public in the 80s, he was. He was like Captain America. He had the adrenaline, the bravery, the royal status. It creates this very powerful shield of public goodwill. And it takes a lot to start chipping away at that kind of foundation.
But the chipping did start, and pretty soon after, didn't it? Let's move on to the marriage. 1986. Sarah Ferguson.
The Fergie era. They become the Duke and Duchess of York. And on paper, it looked great. She was fun. She was a bit of a breath of fresh air. She broke the mold of that stiff royal protocol.
But the cracks appeared pretty quickly.
Very quickly. You have to remember, Andrew was still an active naval officer.
So he wasn't home much.
He was away for long, long stretches at sea. Sarah was left alone in a drafty palace dealing with the media that just turned on her. They were vicious. They called her the Duchess of Pork. They criticized her weight, her fashion, everything. She was drowning, and her husband wasn't there.
And it's while he's off at sea that this whole happy unmarried dynamic really starts to form. They separate in 1992. Which was the Queen's annus horribilis, her horrible year.
Right.
And then the photos.
The John Bryan photos, August 1992.
The toe-sucking photos.
Well, technically he was kissing her toes, but yes, that's how everyone remembers it. The photos showed her topless on holiday with her financial advisor, John Bryan. It was a massive scandal that effectively ended any hope of them getting back together.
But what's so fascinating here is not the divorce itself, which was finalized in 1996. It's what happened after.
They never really left each other.
Exactly. It's bizarre. They divorced, but they continued to live together, first at Sunny Hill Park, then the much grander Royal Lodge. For decades, they literally called themselves the happiest unmarried couple in the world.
It's a very strange setup.
And this is where the financial weirdness starts to really creak into the story, right? Because Sarah Ferguson, bless her, she was not great with money.
She was catastrophic with money. I mean, she was getting into massive, massive debt, bordering on bankruptcy multiple times over the years.
And Andrew stepped in.
He did. In 2011, she actually described him as her knight on a white charger who intervened to clear her debts. Now, we have to pause there and ask a question.
How?
Andrew is a naval officer, then a trade envoy. He's well off, sure, but he's not a billionaire. How is he clearing multi-million-pound debts for his ex-wife?
That is the million-pound question, or the multi-million-pound question. Where is that liquidity coming from?
And this financial codependency, this constant need for cash to prop up her lifestyle and his own, it really seems to be the root of so many of the bad decisions that followed. He needed money to maintain a lifestyle that matched his royal status, not his actual income.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the next chapter.
Yeah.
The trade envoy years.
Air Miles, Andy.
The nickname that just stuck to him.
It really did. So from 2001 to 2011, he is the UK's special representative for international trade and investment, which is basically, salesman-in-chief for Great Britain.
A role that, in theory, makes a lot of sense. You use a royal to open doors for British businesses. Hello, I'm the Duke of York. Would you like to buy our jet engines?
In theory, yes. But in practice, it became a magnet for controversy. The scrutiny over his expenses was intense. There was one year where they hit £620,000.
Wow.
And of that, £465,000 was just on travel.
He wasn't flying EasyJet then?
No. Private jets, luxury hotel suites. He treated it like a royal tour, not a series of business trips. But, the real problem wasn't even the cost to the taxpayer. It was the company he was keeping.
This is where the judgment issue becomes glaringly obvious. Who was he meeting on these trips?
Well, he wasn't just meeting standard CEOs of respectable companies. He was meeting Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of the Libyan dictator.
Right.
He was meeting with senior members of the Tunisian regime right before the Arab Spring Revolution toppled them. He had frequent meetings, something like a dozen, with Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan.
And Aliyev is a very controversial figure.
To put it mildly, Azerbaijan has a terrible human rights record. Critics at the time were arguing that Andrew was lending the legitimacy of the British crown to a regime that was actively suppressing its own people.
And there was the accusation that he was a cheerleader-in-chief for the arms trade.
Specifically regarding sales to Bahrain, campaigners against the arms trade were absolutely furious. They argued that by smoothing the way for these arms deals, he was, in a way, complicit in how those weapons might eventually be used.
But beyond the politics of it all, there were allegations of straight-up personal corruption.
And this is where it gets really murky.
We have to talk about Sunny Hill Park, because I've looked at the real estate data from that time, and this deal makes absolutely no sense. It's baffling.
It raises so many red flags, it's like a parade. So Sunny Hill Park was the big, modern house given to Andrew and Fergie when they married.
They called it South York, right? Because it looked like something out of the TV show Dallas.
Exactly. A bit gaudy. So in 2002, he puts it on the market for £12 million.
And it sits there.
It rots for 5 years. Nobody wants it. The market is flat. The house is getting dilapidated. Then suddenly in 2007, it sells for $15 million.
Wait. It's been on the market for 5 years at $12 million, and someone comes in and pays £3 million over the asking price. Who on earth does that?
Timur Kulybyev, the son-in-law of the then president of Kazakhstan.
Okay, so why? Why would you pay that much extra for a house that no one else wants?
That is the question that financial investigators and journalists have been asking for years. In anti-money laundering circles, paying significantly above the market value for an asset is a classic textbook way to move money.
To disguise a payment.
Exactly. A BPD investigation later linked the funds that were used for that purchase to a wider money laundering network and a bribery scheme in Kazakhstan.
So the implication is the extra £3 million wasn't for the house itself.
The implication, and Andrew has always denied knowing anything about the source of the funds, is that it was a transaction for something else entirely. Access, influence, a favor.
And this isn't a one-off. You then have the fixer accusations. The Daily Mail ran a huge story about a Greek and Swiss water deal.
Yes, this was a massive story. They alleged, based on leaked emails, that Andrew stood to make a £4 million commission for brokering infrastructure deals in Kazakhstan.
A commission. For a member of the royal family who was acting as an official government trade envoy. That has to be illegal, right?
It would certainly be a massive conflict of interest, at the very least. A trade envoy is supposed to represent the country, not their own personal bank account.
What did the palace say?
The palace denied it completely, claimed the emails were forgeries, and they even tried to get a court injunction to block publication on privacy grounds. But the story was out there. The smoke was just getting thicker and thicker around his finances.
And it brings us right back to that central question. How did he pay for his life? We have a whole section here on financial opaqueness. Let's just look at the raw numbers.
Let's do the math. As a retired naval officer, he had a pension of about £20,000 a year. He also got an annuity from the Queen, from her private funds, of roughly £249,000 a year. Now, that is a lot of money to you and me.
Of course.
But he was buying ski chalets in Verbier, Switzerland for £13 million. He was driving top-of-the-line Range Rovers, wearing Patek Philippe watches, maintaining the lifestyle of the global ultra-wealthy. The math just does not add up.
So he had to have other sources of income. He had a bank of friends.
A very specific and very wealthy network of friends. We have to talk about the connection to David Rowland and his bank, Bank Haviland. This is a bit complex, so let's break it down.
Please.
In 2017, Andrew takes out a loan of £1.5 million from Rowland's bank.
Okay, a loan. High net worth individuals take out loans.
Right. But just 11 days later, that loan is paid off in full. Not by Andrew from his salary, but by a wire transfer of $1.5 million from a different company, which was also controlled by the Rowland family.
So he borrows money from Rowland's bank, and then Rowland's other company pays off the loan for him.
Essentially, yes. The money goes in a circle. Andrew ends up with the cash benefit of the loan, and the debt just vanishes. In the corporate world, that looks incredibly suspicious. It looks like a gift that's been disguised as a loan, maybe to avoid scrutiny or tax implications.
And this isn't an isolated incident. There's the Turkish fraud case, the one involving a woman named Nebahat İzbilin.
This one is just bizarre. She was the wife of a jailed Turkish politician, and she was trying to get her assets out of Turkey. She transferred £750,000 directly to Prince Andrew.
For what?
Well, she claimed in court filings that she was told it was for his assistance with getting her a passport.
She thought she was buying a passport from a prince.
That's what she alleged. Andrew's team, when the bank flagged the payment, told them it was a wedding gift for his daughter, Princess Beatrice.
A £750,000 wedding gift from a woman he barely knew who was in the middle of a legal crisis.
And Beatrice, by the way, reportedly knew absolutely nothing about the supposed gift. But here is the real kicker. Andrew repaid the money, all of it, but only after her lawyers got involved and started making noise.
Which strongly suggests he knew he couldn't defend keeping it.
Exactly. Innocent people don't usually rush to repay seven-figure gifts the moment lawyers start calling, but the pattern is just so clear. He was monetizing his position, he was trading access and the perception of influence for cash.
And he was even getting into crypto. The Pegasus Group tour.
Oh, this is one of the more surreal episodes. This is June 2019. He gives a private behind-the-scenes tour of Buckingham Palace to a group of crypto businessmen.
Why?
Because they were paying Fergie, his ex-wife, a large sum of money for brand ambassadorship. He was acting as the royal tour guide to help close his ex-wife's business deals.
It's transactional.
Yep.
It's pay to play, using a royal palace as the backdrop.
It's all transactional. And that mindset, that willingness to blur every ethical line for cash or to maintain his lifestyle, that leads us directly to the point of no return. It leads us to Jeffrey Epstein.
This is the darkest chapter, and I think it's really important to trace the timeline correctly because Andrew's defense has so often relied on confusing the dates.
That's right. He met Epstein through Ghislaine Maxwell back in the 90s. That's been established. But the critical error, the really unforgivable judgment call, was in 2010.
By 2010, Epstein had already been convicted. He was a registered sex offender of the United States.
Exactly. He had served jail time. The world knew what he was. This wasn't some secret. And yet Andrew flies to New York. He stays at Epstein's mansion. He is photographed walking in Central Park with him, smiling.
His explanation, which came much later, was that he went there to officially break off the friendship.
It's an explanation that, for most observers, simply doesn't hold water. You don't fly across the Atlantic and stay in a man's house for several days just to say goodbye. You send an email. You make a phone call. The visit implies a continued, comfortable relationship.
And then, of course, come the direct allegations from Virginia Giuffre. She claimed she was trafficked by Epstein and forced to have sexual encounters with Prince Andrew in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And we have the photograph, the infamous one. Andrew with his arm around a teenage Virginia Giuffre's waist, with Ghislaine Maxwell smiling in the background. It was reportedly taken inside Maxwell's London home.
Andrew's supporters have tried for years to claim it's faked. They've said his fingers look too chubby or the lighting is wrong.
But no credible forensic analysis has ever definitively proven it to be a fake. It remains this piece of damning visual evidence at the center of the story.
So the pressure's just building and building. And in November 2019, Andrew decides he's going to fix it all. He sits down with Emily Maitlis for BBC Newsnight.
A decision that will go down in history as perhaps the single worst public relations move ever made by a public figure. He genuinely thought he could charm his way out of it. He thought, I'm the prince of the realm, I can explain this.
And instead of an explanation, we got, I don't sweat.
The alibis were, well, they were memorable. He claimed he couldn't have been sweating on the dance floor at the Tramp nightclub in 2001, as Giuffre alleged, because he had a condition. He said he had an adrenaline overdose during the Falklands War that left him unable to perspire.
Which is medically dubious, to say the least.
Highly dubious. And then there was the Pizza Express defense. He claimed he couldn't possibly have been with Giuffre on the specific night in London because he had taken his daughter to a children's party at a Pizza Express in Woking.
The phrase, I was at Pizza Express in Woking, became a national punchline overnight. But beyond the memes, what was the real damage from that interview?
The real damage was his total, shocking lack of empathy. For an hour, he talked about Jeffrey Epstein, he talked about himself, he talked about his honor. He barely mentioned the victims. He showed no regret for the friendship, other than to say it was unbecoming for a royal. The public saw a man who was arrogant, completely out of touch, and utterly refusing to take any accountability.
And the fallout was instant.
It was immediate. Within days, the Queen had to suspend him from all public duties. Charities and businesses he was a patron of dropped him like a stone. The royal shield completely shattered in that 1 hour.
But the legal battle, that dragged on for a couple more years. Until 2022.
That's right. Virginia Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against him in the U.S. Andrew's legal team tried everything to get it dismissed. They failed. And facing the prospect of a public jury trial, he settled.
For a lot of money.
A massive sum. It was never officially confirmed, but reports put it at over £12 million, which included a substantial donation to her charity for victims of trafficking. He admitted no liability, but he also didn't get the chance to clear his name in court, which he had promised to do.
Which brings us to the final act, the dismantling. This is the period from 2022 to late 2025, where he is slowly and systematically erased from public life.
It started with the military affiliations. His mother, the Queen, who had been his biggest supporter and protector his whole life, had to be the one to do it. In January 2022, she removed his military titles and his royal patronages. He also had to agree to stop using His Royal Highness in any public capacity.
But legally at that point, he was still a prince. He was still the Duke of York.
He was, until late 2025. This is where the story enters its most recent and most dramatic phase. After the Queen's death, King Charles III took a much, much harder line than his mother ever did.
In November 2025, letters patent were issued by the king. This was the final blow, wasn't it?
It was the final legal blow. The formal removal of the title prince and the style of Royal Highness by a legal act of the sovereign. He's now, officially and legally, just Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. This is completely unprecedented for a king's own brother.
But at the same time, he lost the lease on Royal Lodge.
The whole Royal Lodge saga is a perfect example of his denial. He had the 75-year lease on a massive 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park. But he couldn't afford the upkeep.
The paint was peeling, there was damp.
Exactly. The place was falling apart. King Charles wanted him out into something smaller and cheaper, like Frogmore Cottage. Andrew refused. He dug his heels in for months.
But in late 2025, he finally had to cave.
He was served formal notice to vacate. He had to surrender the lease. And crucially, the Crown Estate made a point of clarifying that he wouldn't get any compensation for the millions he'd spent on renovations because of the dilapidations, which is a polite way of saying he let the place rot.
So he's moved to, where is it, Marsh Farm?
Or a similar property on the Sandringham Estate in Norfolk. The point is, it's a private home. Much smaller, far more isolated, out of the public eye.
And his security.
Gone. The taxpayer-funded police protection was removed. For a while, Charles was paying for private security out of his own pocket, but reports from late 2024 and 2025 suggest that even that funding was cut off. He is, for all intents and purposes, on his own.
But wait, it gets even more complicated. Just as he's being pushed into total obscurity, we get this bizarre story about a Chinese spy connection.
This is the sting in the tail. In late 2024 and throughout 2025, reports started to emerge about his relationship with a Chinese businessman named Chris Yang.
And who was Chris Yang?
He was a businessman Andrew had been inviting to royal events, like Pitch at Palace. But it turns out that British intelligence, MI5, had identified him as being involved in covert activity for the Chinese Communist Party. He was actually barred from entering the UK.
And Andrew was also meeting with Kai Qi, a very senior Chinese official.
A very high-ranking official, yes. Effectively Xi Jinping's chief of staff. Andrew met him in both London and Beijing. And the concern from UK intelligence, and they were explicit about this in leaked reports, was that Andrew now posed a potential national security risk.
Why? Because he knows state secrets.
Not necessarily. It's because of his vulnerability. He's desperate for money. He's desperate for relevance. He feels abandoned. That makes him a prime target for recruitment or manipulation by foreign intelligence services. It's the classic honey trap or financial trap scenario. If you have a broke, disgraced royal who feels abandoned by his family and his country, that is a potential asset you can exploit.
And just when you think the story can't possibly get any worse, January 2026 rolls around.
A new allegation. Another Epstein victim came forward through her lawyer, claiming a sexual encounter took place at Royal Lodge in 2010.
2010. That's remarkably late in the timeline, much later than the Giuffre allegations.
It is, and it reinforces the idea that this wasn't just some youthful indiscretion in the early 2000s. The claim alleges she was even shown around Buckingham Palace and served tea by staff. It paints this picture of total impunity right up until the end.
So where did that leave him now? He's had to surrender his gun license. They've literally renamed Prince Andrew Way in a town in Northern Ireland. His banner as a Knight of the Garter is gone from St. George's Chapel.
He is a man who has been erased. He exists in this strange limbo. He is still the king's brother, a biological fact, but he is a pariah. He has the surname Mountbatten-Windsor, but he has no role, no protection, and by all accounts, very few friends left.
It is a staggering collapse.
Yeah.
From the balcony of Buckingham Palace to a farmhouse in Norfolk. From the hero of the Falklands War to a potential national security risk.
And the question that hangs over all of it is, how much of this was the system protecting him for too long, and how much of it was his own bottomless hubris?
I think that's the takeaway, isn't it? The royal shield is an incredibly powerful thing. It protected him from the consequences of his spending, his questionable associations, and his behavior for 40 years. But in the end, it couldn't protect him from the truth.
Or maybe just from the changing standards of the world. What passed in the 80s and 90s, that Randy Andy playboy persona, it just looks very, very different through the lens of the 2020s.
So here is a final thought to leave you with. We know about the trade envoy scandals that have been reported. We know about the Epstein links. We know about the eviction. But the actual files, the official Foreign Office documents that detail all of his trade trips, they are locked.
Sealed until the year 2065.
2065.
Yeah.
We will likely both be gone by then. Andrew certainly will be. You have to ask yourself, what is in those files? If what we know now is this damaging, the bribery allegations, the friendships with dictators, what on earth is hidden in those government archives that justified sealing them for nearly a century?
And that is the ghost that will haunt the legacy of the House of York for decades to come.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another story from the archives.